Hi, and welcome to the Saved, Healed, and Made Whole podcast, where holistic health really can be simple, affordable, and attainable for you and your family. I am your host, Kayla J. Esteban. I am a biblical naturopathic doctor at Sozo Holistic Healing, where I work with natural-minded moms to find healing in mind, body, and spirit. So go grab your favorite cup of herbal tea, take a deep, relaxing breath, and we'll get started. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like my head is just spinning with all of the different food options that come out. And I feel like every year or two, there's like a new trend out there that people are doing. So I have to ask, do you follow any food trends? Like there's, keto, plant-based, paleo, gluten-free, vegan, vegetarian, carnivore, low histamine, low FODMAP, Whole30. The list goes on and on. And those are like the healthier ones, but then there's kind of like the old school things like Atkins and South Beach and things like that too. Like there's just so many, and each one of them, I'm sure, has a really, really convincing sales pitch for why they are the best, right? And lots of science supposedly that backs it up. And so I get questions from people sometimes about what they should be eating, especially when it sounds like very conflicting information, like the vegan diet versus the carnivore diet, right? They're completely opposite. And yet each side is very passionate about why they make those choices. And I don't think that there are any simple answers. Unfortunately, I would love it if we could just tell everybody to eat one thing. That would be really nice if that worked. But I do think that everybody's needs are different, and that is kind of the beauty of it, but also the challenge of it is that we just have to kind of find what fits for you best. And we're not necessarily going to solve this all in one podcast, but I can at least give you a starting place, some helpful tips to get you going, and definitely, if you feel a need to work with a practitioner like myself or a nutritionist or something like that, at least this will get you going. So I do also want to mention just some of the top mistakes that I do see people make when they're following diet trends. And the easiest way to start, at least to choose something or to kind of pick a category, is to consider if you have any food sensitivities, especially since they're getting a lot more common nowadays. People sometimes will grow out of sensitivities. They might be temporary, but at least for this moment, recognizing what makes you react, whether it's an allergy or just a sensitivity, and continuing to avoid it. So if you are not sure if you have allergies or sensitivities, there are certain testings that you can do. There's kind of the conventional allergy test with a doctor, and that is an option. You can also do an elimination diet if that is something that you've heard of before. The only thing is, so allergy testing with a doctor you can have to pay extra money for that. An elimination diet is a pretty big time commitment, and it can be tough to stick to, especially when you're cutting out all of the things to start with. Some people, when they cut out all this stuff, they're like, well, I don't even know what I can eat anymore. And so I'm not a big fan of that as an option. There is an at-home test that you can do that is a lot quicker and easier. And it is, I believe it's called like a Cocoa Pop test. I don't know if that's the actual name, but that's something that I've heard. And basically what you do is you eat the food that you're not sure if you have a sensitivity to or not, and then wait about 15 minutes so your body can digest it and start processing it. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. So first you take your pulse. So you get like a resting pulse rate, and then you eat the food and wait 15 minutes, and then you take your pulse again. And if your pulse has increased, that's an indication that you have a food sensitivity to that. And if you wanted to do like a mass test of different things, you don't want to do it right in a row, I would probably wait, like test gluten one day and then test eggs the next day and dairy the next day. So it is a little bit of a project, but it's definitely a lot easier and simpler than a full-on elimination diet. And so that is an option. The probably fastest and easiest way is that I can do muscle testing, whether it's an in-person session or it's also possible in a virtual session. If you need an explanation on how virtual muscle testing works, you're welcome to contact me, and the details will be in the show notes. But it's something that's so quick and easy. I can literally just go down the list of all the different foods, anything that, even if it's not a conventional sensitivity, if you're like, oh, I think I've noticed something with cantaloupe, can you test it? And it takes seconds to get a yes or no response, and it is quite accurate. So that is an option. But whatever you choose, it needs to, after you've removed sensitivities from your diet options, whatever you choose has to be sustainable for you. So I don't like these super restrictive diets that don't allow you to live or force you to spend hours and hours cooking, like hand peeling your hand julienning your zucchinis to make zucchini noodles. Like, if you have a machine that makes them really quickly, then go for it. But if it's going to be just making you miserable and affecting your quality of life, sometimes it's not actually as healthy. Or if it's something that's going to be so hard to follow that you keep kind of relapsing on or eating those kind of forbidden foods, then maybe it's time to reevaluate if that option is really the best for you. I do generally recommend using a whole food natural diet as much as possible. I don't mean whole foods like the grocery store. I mean like eating things in its most natural state, like less as minimally processed as possible. So for example, if you are vegan, and there's so many different ways to be vegan, right? Like, you can be what I call kind of like the plastic vegan, where you just eat all of the meals like an omnivore, but you use like fake cheeses and fake meats and things like that. And the reason why this is so hard to live off of is because these highly processed foods have a lot of preservatives, they don't have a lot of nutrients, and this is why the vegan movement gets a bad rap, because some people do get very, very unhealthy living off of these fake things, versus if you were like a whole food plant-based vegan, where you're eating lots of beans and rice and quinoa and things like that, legumes, garbanzo beans and stuff like that, that is whole foods and gives you the nutrients that you need. And so this is something to do with using just like common sense and making healthy choices. I am not a fan of people using health trends as kind of like a good excuse to still eat junk food, just because it fits that trend's parameters. So like, for example, if you're going gluten-free, whipped cream and Cheetos and Oreos are all gluten-free, but I wouldn't necessarily consider that healthy, right? Like bacon and cheesecake are both keto, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend eating those things every single day. And so just because it kind of fits this health trend or like whatever parameters they've set, doesn't necessarily mean that it's still going to be a good thing. Doesn't mean that you can't eat them in moderation necessarily, but just like use reasonable common sense, guys. Like, you're just still eat your fruits and your vegetables and your whole foods and things like that. I have seen people be hospitalized for things like keto and vegan just because they ate so much plastic foods, or just like the unhealthy, like keto was all tuna and bacon and cheesecake, and yeah, that will get you hospitalized even though it's technically keto. So, following just common sense and trying to listen to your body and recognize what makes you actually feel good. And I don't mean like if you eat a bunch of sugar and it lights up your brain, it'll make you feel happy, but it doesn't necessarily make you feel good in the long run. Like, your food should give you fuel. It should be this sustainable energy. It should help you to feel positive, not lit up like sugar or processed foods, but like positive and nourished, not like a buzz from caffeine or something like that. And if you're feeling either right after you eat or within an hour or two after you eat, if the food that you're eating causes you to feel sluggish or moody or unstable or irritable or nauseous or bloated, or if you're having a hard time concentrating or communicating with other people after you eat, then that is your body's message of saying, like, hey, there's something in here that's throwing us off, that's causing these health issues. And even though those are kind of the immediate symptoms and maybe they're kind of easy to ignore in the short term, it's a signal that you could be having more chronic issues developing because of this regular eating pattern. And it's just something that's not setting well. So paying attention to your body's signals can help direct you with what you should be eating. And sometimes this can be foods that might be classically considered healthy. People may not react the same way to. Like for me at the moment, I've still been working on this. I just very recently started reacting to fermented foods. And I mean, there are some people that just have a harder time processing fermented foods and are really sensitive to that. There are other things, I've got like something temporary that's causing me to be sensitive to it. But at the moment, even though on paper fermented foods are healthy and I would love to be eating them, I need to be more restrictive in that at the moment. Another thing is to be open to a little flexibility if you really want something or if you really need it. Like if you decide you want to be a raw vegan and that is what you feel the best in and you can maintain a healthy lifestyle with that, but you occasionally want to eat a piece of bacon because it makes your soul happy, like there's no food police that will arrest you because you broke a rule. I know people will probably give you some, maybe some teasing like, oh, I thought you were a vegan, but who cares? Who cares what other people think? Like, we don't register our diet plans like we register for political parties, like if you want to eat a mostly plant-based diet with meat a couple times a week and maybe a couple times a year, you go to Chick-fil-A, that's 100% your choice. Don't let anybody try to guilt you or shame you because yes, of course, there is eating healthy for your body, but there's also that, like, there's a reason why desserts exist. They're not nourishing us physically, but they're like nourishing our soul. There's something that we really enjoy about desserts. And so that's like feeding a different part of you. So just tuning into that can be an aspect of health. And so like, for example, with me, like I at one time did kind of like a modified paleo because I was reacting more negatively to eggs, but I was pretty okay with dairy. So it was like I was mostly paleo, but I wasn't super strict. I know some of the spices are like considered paleo and others are not. I just use whatever's in my spice cabinet. Because it's fine. Like, it's fine. It really is. Like, whatever you want to do does not have to follow all of the conventional rules. And, like, nobody's going to check up on you. And if they do, they need to find something better to do with their lives if somebody's going to give you a hard time for something that is, I mean, if somebody's giving you a hard time because you're following a really negative, unhealthy pattern, that's one thing. But if you're genuinely doing what's healthy and works well for your body and your life, then nobody needs to be your food police. So finding your own balance is really important, especially with macros. Like some people do need higher protein. Like if you're in a really labor-intensive job, some people need lower fat if their gallbladder is just weaker and struggling. Some people need like 2 to 3 big meals during the day, and other people, like me, I have a little smaller stomach, so I do a lot better on just 4 to 6 smaller meals or kind of like spreading out snacks. I don't do well trying to cram a big meal into my stomach and then going a long time without eating. It needs to fit your lifestyle. Like I mentioned, like, do you have an office job? Do you have a labor-intensive job? Are you an athlete? Are you running around with kids all day? Like, that is going to be dependent on what your food choices are, how much activity you spend, your metabolism. Some people are fast burners. Some people are slow burners. All of this is going to really play into the macro percentages. Maybe you have like 30% protein in your plate. Maybe you have like 60% carbs or 20% carbs. It's just going to be different depending on who you are, what your life is like, what your body systems are. And also just the stage in your life, as women, sometimes if we're pregnant or if we're breastfeeding, I wasn't eating a ton of meat before I got pregnant with my son, but with him, like, he is such a meat eater on the outside, and like I needed meat. I craved meat super hard with him when I was pregnant. So I just listened to that and I leaned into that while I was pregnant and ate a lot more meat. If you're breastfeeding, of course, you need a lot of extra calories. And so you might need to eat differently for a little while, like with the fermentation issue I have right now. Like, I probably won't always need to do this, but at this moment, while I'm working on this, I need to give up that. So it's just different things, different people, different needs. And going back to what I was saying before, your food choices should fuel you. They should make you feel empowered and nourish you. They should bring you peace and not anxiety. And it does not need to be Pinteresty. It doesn't need to fit into a trend. Repeat after me, there is no food police. And so if you've read all of these tips and you're still not sure, you're welcome to contact me. I would be happy to go over any concerns that you have, even muscle test. Sometimes I can muscle test like what percentage of macros your body needs. If you're just not sure, I can test like what specific foods, if you need more fiber, if you need more hydration, like different things like that, if you need more minerals. These are all things that are muscle testable and very quick and easy to do. If you still have any questions about muscle testing and how that works, every practitioner muscle tests differently. So if you're kind of curious about the way that I do it, or how I can best serve you and figure out what can and should be eating, you are welcome to set up a free discovery call with me. You can see the details in the show notes. And I also do have a recorded workshop that's available through my website under the products tab, and I'll link that too in the show notes as well, called Making Healthy Meals Happen. And it has all of my tips and tricks for saving money and time and energy while putting food on the table for your family. It's not gimmicky, it's not like trendy, it's just really simple, practical, easy things that moms, especially with like a lot of kids and don't have a lot of free time to be fancy and Pinteresty, like we just get it done on a budget and it works and it tastes good. And so those are all of my tips in there in the workshop if you want a little extra support. And thank you for joining me today for this podcast. I hope it helped to just kind of enlighten on any areas that you might need to make adjustments in your food, or maybe gave you some clarity if you've just been feeling like lost and pulled in different directions with all these different marketing strategies from different options. And I hope that you have a very blessed day.